The flowers were wrong. Dr. Lena Vasquez noticed it 40 minutes before the delegation arrived. The centerpiece arrangements were earth orchids, deep violet, threaded between stalks of dried wheat and small candles casting the tablecloths in warm amber, beautiful. Thoughtfully assembled by a protocol team that had spent 8 weeks consulting xenocultural advisors, botanical databases, and 3 competing academic papers on Galaxian chromatic sensitivities. Wrong. Violet was the Galaxian color for quarantine. She had the flowers replaced with white lilies in 11 minutes, the only crisis of the evening she managed to solve before it started. The United Nations Diplomatic Center had been transformed with the kind of meticulous ambition that only appears when humanity is trying to impress someone it's genuinely afraid of. Every surface clean enough to reflect a person's conscience. Security personnel at precise intervals, expressions neutral, earpieces silent. The kitchen, commandeered from one of the city's most decorated restaurants, had been preparing since 4 meter, its head chef Celeste treating the evening with the solemn focus of someone who understood, without being told, that the stakes were not entirely culinary. Lena stood at the center of it all in deep navy and did what she always did before the hard moments. Breathed slowly, read the room once, made peace with the things she couldn't control. 6 months of preparation, 2 years of first contact negotiation, through relay satellites and careful mathematical communiques. A decade of her career building toward diplomacy that didn't exist in any textbook because the other party had never been human. The Galaxian delegation arrived precisely on schedule. Punctuality for them was not courtesy, it was information. To arrive early was anxiety, to arrive late was aggression. To arrive on the second was to signal you had measured the situation and found it manageable. She found that oddly comforting. High Chancellor Vel-Orah led them through the entrance. Lena had studied the photographs, the footage, the careful descriptions from the survey team. She thought she was ready. She wasn't, entirely. No briefing document captures the specific quality of presence that some beings carry. Vel-Orah was tall, bilateral, its ceremonial robes, a deep shifting grey that moved like water caught in slow current. Its face, if face was the right word, was long, composed of angular planes with eyes the color of old iron that moved with deliberate economy, touching each object in the room once and retaining it permanently. Behind it, the delegation arranged themselves along the far wall and went still, as if stillness was their natural state and everything else was the exception. Lena stepped forward, offered the formal bilateral greeting, right hand open, left hand folded across the chest, and said, "High Chancellor, welcome to Earth. We are honored." Vel-Orah regarded her for precisely 3 seconds. Then, through the translator bead at her collar, "Ambassador Vasquez, your world smells significantly of biological activity." Lena held her smile with the steadiness of someone trained for exactly this. "Yes," she said, "we've been cooking." The first tray arrived 7 minutes into the reception. Buffalo wings glistening in cayenne butter glaze, aged blue cheese deeply veined, sourdough, herb oil. And at the far left corner, because a junior sous chef had genuinely believed it would demonstrate culinary ambition, a shallow bowl of ghost pepper chutney. The server barely cleared the table's edge when it happened. No sound, no visible alarm. Just simultaneous collective stillness, every ceremonial robe lit from within with faint pulsing amber as sensor arrays embedded in the fabric came alive at once. The lights were subtle, the implications were not. Vel-Orah stopped mid-motion. Eyes moved to the tray, then to Lena, then back to the tray, with the measured deliberation of a being re-evaluating a situation it thought it understood. The translator bead crackled. "Ambassador, what is the nature of the biological threat you have introduced into this room?" Lena looked at the wings. They looked back at her, glistening. She looked at the Chancellor, at the glowing robes. At the ghost pepper chutney sitting at the corner of the board, with the cheerful innocence of something that didn't know what it had just done. "That's dinner," she said. The silence that followed was the loudest thing she had heard in 2 years of first contact work. Vel-Orah's iron eyes rested on her with something she would spend a long time trying to name, not hostility, not fear, but a very particular quality of recalibration. Like a navigator, handed a map that contradicts everything the stars have been saying. The hall held its breath. She had prepared for 100 difficult scenarios. She had never prepared for the possibility that the first casualty of first contact would be the appetizer course. Dr. Marcus Osei had not been told the delegation had arrived. This was calculated. Despite being Earth's leading xenobiologist, the single most qualified person to translate human biochemistry into Galaxian terms, Marcus had a measurable tendency to say accurate things at the wrong moment with the wrong emphasis. He had been assigned to a comfortable antechamber, briefed to remain on standby, and provided with a plate from the kitchen. He was working through the blue cheese when the door opened. The protocol officer who fetched him had the expression of someone delivering news they didn't fully understand, but were certain was not good. Marcus looked at the half-eaten cheese, looked at the officer, put the plate down with the specific reluctance of someone who knows they won't be coming back to it soon. He walked into the banquet hall to find Vel-Orah standing at the near end of the table robes, still casting that faint amber pulse, iron eyes fixed on the food tray, and Ambassador Vasquez 3 feet away, managing the situation through sheer professional dignity. She looked at him, at his shirt, which had blue cheese on it. He looked down. "In my defense," he said quietly, "I was on standby." "Explain the food," she said. "Which part?" "All of it." Marcus looked at the tray, looked at Vel-Orah. Those iron eyes moved to him with the slow, deliberate economy he was already beginning to recognize, not threat assessment, not exactly curiosity, but something more precise than either. The full processing attention of a mind that had decided this warranted it completely. He'd spent 20 years studying non-human biology. He had never been studied back quite like this. "Right," he said, and began. "Capsaicin first, because the wings were the most immediate problem. A chemical compound produced by plants of the genus Capsicum as an evolutionary deterrent. A targeted neurotoxin designed to cause pain response in non-target species, specifically mammals. Specifically the kind with claws and a habit of eating seed-bearing fruit and ruining the plant's reproductive strategy. Birds, the intended seed dispersal mechanism, lacked the relevant pain receptors entirely, which was how the plant wanted it. The plant," said Vel-Orah slowly, "evolved a neurotoxin specifically to discourage mammalian consumption." "Yes," said Marcus. "And you eat it recreationally?" "Yes." Vel-Orah's iron eyes moved to Lena, then back. A consideration, cross-referencing what it was hearing against what it had already observed. Building something internally that hadn't existed before Marcus started talking. Fermentation next. Humanity cultivating living bacterial cultures, introducing them to organic compounds, allowing controlled decomposition over weeks to months, then consuming the result as a delicacy. The blue cheese on the board, technically a carefully maintained colony of Penicillium roqueforti, a mold culture grown into dairy medium. The prized flavor produced entirely by bacterial metabolic byproducts. They were, in the most accurate sense, eating the waste products of a living microbial civilization. "You eat the metabolic waste products of bacteria," said Vel-Orah. The careful flatness of a being assembling a sentence it couldn't quite believe was necessary. "We pair it with wine," Marcus offered. "Which is also fermented." "Yes." Stomach acid levels, almost as an aside. Human gastric environment at a pH qualifying as highly corrosive by most chemical classifications. The foods producing the most intense reactions, capsaicin, burn, acid fermentation, sharpness, aggressive tannins of oversteeped tea, were the most culturally beloved. The competitive eating circuits. The hot sauce review channels. The Ghost Pepper Challenge videos this last delivered with the specific grimace of a man who had watched too many of them. The secondary translator unit went silent for 11 seconds. Vel-Orah broke it. It leaned forward, entire upper body tilting as one unit, careful curiosity of something deciding this warranted closer examination, and asked with what Marcus could only describe as horrified fascination. "You evolved the ability to consume chemical irritants and then you made it a hobby?" Marcus thought about every hot sauce shelf he'd ever owned. "We gave it a TV show," he said quietly. "You are describing," said Vel-Orah finally, "a species that identified the compounds. Its biology evolved to resist and then began training itself to want them." "I suppose we are," Marcus said. Vel-Orah turned to the ghost pepper chutney in its small ramekin, regarded it with the focused stillness of a being reassessing an entire civilization through a single data point. "We need," it said quietly, "to revise several reports." Lena looked at Marcus. Marcus looked at Lena. Nothing needed to be said. The ghost pepper chutney sat in its ramekin, entirely unaware of the diplomatic weight it was carrying. The incident with Corporal Tomas Rivera happened at 7:43 p.m. An honest mistake. The ghost pepper chutney had been repositioned during the sensor sweep, coming to rest beside a nearly identical ramekin containing mango and ginger salsa. Rivera, 24, 6 months into his posting, 3 hours standing at attention in dress uniform, reached for what he believed was the palate cleanser during a 2-minute break. He knew immediately. To his credit, he did not make a sound. His face moved through shock, confirmation, acceptance, and a very specific resignation that only appears in people living through an irreversible decision. He turned slightly away. His eyes watered involuntarily. He breathed. Once, twice. "I need milk," he said quietly. "Please." The Galaxian orbital bioscanner array, already calibrated to elevated sensitivity after the appetizer alert, read Rivera's capsaicin cascade as a chemical exposure event. It could not distinguish between voluntary ingestion and involuntary contamination. The physiological signatures were identical. The alert reached Vel-Orah's robe sensors in 40 seconds. The amber glow returned faster this time, every seam simultaneously. Vel-Orah's head turned toward Rivera with a speed that was, for the Chancellor, the equivalent of urgency. Lena positioned herself between them. Voice level. The word voluntary, used 6 times in 90 seconds. Marcus reached Rivera, assessed him, handed him the milk, then turned to face Vel-Orah directly. "The damage presentation is absent," said Vel-Orah. "He's fine," said Marcus. "Tomorrow he'll tell everyone about it." "Tell everyone." "Like a good story." Vel-Orah looked at Rivera. Rivera, over the rim of his milk glass, tears still running involuntarily, offered a small, watery smile. "Genuinely okay." Vel-Orah was still for a long moment. "He is proud of it," it said slowly. An observation being filed into a growing collection that didn't fit any existing framework. "Little bit," Marcus said. He guided Rivera toward the exit. Rivera went milk glass in hand, foil blanket around his shoulders, head held with the dignity of someone who had done something embarrassing in front of history and decided to own it. He did not look back. The orbital array stood down. The amber pulse faded to neutral gray. Lena sat across from Vel-Orah at the far end of the table. Marcus took a position slightly back, close enough to hear, far enough to give the conversation its shape. The hall carried the particular quality of rooms after a near miss. Everything slightly too still. Vel-Orah looked at the table. "What I do not understand," it said, "is why the compound that caused him pain was on this table, intentionally." Lena thought about her mother's kitchen. Pozole after her father's funeral table, too full, too loud. Everyone crying and eating and laughing within the same hour. Aglio e olio at midnight after failed exams, garlic and chili becoming over years the smell of being held together, birria eaten standing outside a hospital at 2 a.m. because eating meant she was still present. Still there. "We eat difficult things with people we trust," she said. "When something makes your eyes water or your throat burn, there's something in that. Being safe enough to feel it. You don't eat a ghost pepper alone in the dark." She paused. "Well, some people do." But that's a different conversation. You consume what challenges your biology, said Vel-Orah, to communicate that you are not afraid in this company. Or willing to be uncomfortable in it, Lena said, which might be the same thing. A silence that was not the silence of crisis management, something being held carefully by a mind not yet sure what it meant. On my world, said Vel-Orah, we do not share discomfort, we share comfort, relief from difficulty. This is the meaning of a shared meal. That sounds very peaceful, Lena said. It is, said Vel-Orah. Then, after a long pause, I think perhaps it is also very safe. Lena didn't answer. Some things didn't need to be won. The ghost pepper chutney sat small and unfinished, having done more diplomatic work that evening than anyone had planned. The hazmat protocols were, technically, still active. The atmospheric suits were elegant. Galaxian engineers favored clean lines and materials that moved like thought, but they were still hazmat suits. The kitchen staff watching from the service entrance absorbed this with the dignified composure of people who had decided not to acknowledge it out loud. They managed 4 minutes. Then someone whispered. Someone else pressed their lips together. The security officer nearest the door developed a sudden interest in the ceiling. Marcus was not managing any of it. He had returned to his seat and was finishing his cheese plate with a quietness that contained multitudes, unhurried, unrepentant. Vel-Orah found him there. The Chancellor stopped beside his chair, atmospheric suit held not yet worn in one long-fingered hand. It regarded the cheese plate for a long moment. Marcus continued eating. The silence was companionable in the way silences become when two beings have arrived, over the course of an evening, at a mutual understanding requiring no further explanation. The fermented compound, said Vel-Orah, the mammal lactation culture with the bacterial interior structure. Blue cheese, Marcus said. The formal designation. Roquefort, Penicillium roqueforti on aged cow's milk substrate. He looked up. There are versions with goat's milk. Some consider those superior. Strong opinion Roquefort wins. For documentation purposes, said Vel-Orah, I need the full compound name. Marcus reached for the napkin from his breast pocket, the same one from the antechamber, slightly crumpled now, smoothed it on the table, wrote in clear blocky letters, Roquefort. Below it, full chemical classification, bacterial culture, period, regional origin, and the name of his preferred supplier in Lyon, France, included as professional courtesy. He offered it. Vel-Orah took it with both hands, long fingers, receiving it with precise, deliberate care, folded it once, twice, 3 times, and placed it inside its ceremonial robe with the same intentionality given to a treaty document. You are not concerned we have classified much of what you eat as a controlled substance. Marcus considered the last piece of cheese. I'd be more concerned if you hadn't noticed. It means you're paying attention. I think, said Vel-Orah, with the quality of someone thinking aloud in a language they're still learning, your species is very different from what our surveys suggested. How different? They described you as Category 7, promising but fragile, not yet significant. Marcus set his fork down. And now? Vel-Orah looked at the place where the napkin had disappeared into its robe. Then it straightened to its full height and moved toward Lena at the threshold, same bilateral farewell gesture, same measured composure she'd carried since the beginning. 4 hours heavier now with biohazard alerts, orbital quarantines, pepper casualties, and one conversation about the philosophy of shared suffering. She looked, Marcus thought, exactly like herself, tired and precise and exactly where she'd chosen to be. Ambassador Vasquez. The Galaxian Survey Office will be issuing a formal reclassification for Earth. Lena's expression didn't move. I see, she said. From Category 7, Emerging Civilization, to Category 3, Resilient Biosphere reserved for worlds our evolutionary modeling considers a fractional pause fortified beyond standard threat parameters. The room was entirely quiet. On behalf of Earth, Lena said, we accept that designation. "We will schedule a second formal session," said Vel-Orah. "Then, lighter, more precisely chosen, we will bring our own food." The great doors opened. The delegation moved through in their atmospheric suits, sealed, clean, careful. One by one into the transit pod's white light, Vel-Orah last. It paused at the threshold for exactly 3 seconds. The same 3 seconds as the beginning. Then it was gone. Marcus came to stand beside Lena. They looked at the table, nearly empty platters, scattered napkins, the soft wreckage of a dinner that had almost ended diplomacy, and instead somehow deepened it. The ghost pepper chutney in its ramekin, small, unfinished, unashamed. "Did we just—" he started. "Yes," Lena said. Outside, the transit pod rose in a clean, silent arc, no exhaust, no sound, just light moving against dark towards something much larger than either of them could see. Inside, the candles were still burning. "Someone tell Celeste," Lena said quietly, "that the food was perfect." The napkin, folded precisely inside a ceremonial robe crossing the dark between stars, still smelled faintly of Roquefort.